That's sick. That's
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah.
And I know, like in America, like the civil liberties and everything is a massive topic, eh?
Hmm.
Like the freedom and because like in Australia, man, I'm not sure what happens in America, but most of our media covers like what goes on in America. Like
Really?
you turn on it, you turn on our TV, the Australian news is like, oh, a cat got stuck in a roof and it got saved. But then like the main stuff they cover, man, is a lot of American stuff. Like we on our media we see American things happening all the time.
Wow. And so what kind of American things do you see? Like, is it more so like how do I say it? Like a lot of bad things that's going on that you guys see from the media, or is it like a lot of good things or kind of mixed?
Well, like during the lockdowns, man. So we had two massive lockdowns in Australia. They basically locked us down for about I can't remember how long it was, about 4 to 6 months the second time. First time was about 2 or 3 months. So you'd basically get fined if you left your house. You weren't allowed to go to the gym. You couldn't go anywhere basically. You weren't even allowed to a park if you didn't have a reason. Um,
Wow.
it was like George Orwell. It was
Oh,
like full like some like
like
crazy stuff.
1984.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, so during that time, man, we're all just sitting at home, and all we see on the media is just like everything that was going on in the US, like all the riots, all the people protesting, all the George Floyd stuff.
Hmm.
Like we just witnessed all that while we were sitting at home in lockdown.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, the it's I would definitely say that the whole pandemic and all the riots and everything, it definitely wasn't fun over here in the US. I could guarantee that right now. It was just, it's like with kind of tying with what I say, if you feel like you have the ability to to do good things, then you almost feel obligated to do so. In these past couple of years, it's in the US especially, there's just been a lot of bad things going on, and people just don't really seem to want to get along anymore. No one's willing to kind of reach across the other aisle, shake each other's hands, and just understand we all just want the best for each other. We're not really out to out each other, to attack each other, thing like that. And so, like during the riots that you mentioned, I actually had on a professor who's a political scientist, Craig Colloon, and we were talking about all of that, and we were talking about how it's when you resort to stuff like that, like I'm sure what you saw in the Australian news, where it's the riots, the violence, it plagues and decays the moral values of the movement. And you kind of see that, since you say you're a history buff, you see that time and time again in history where these massive acts of violence or like riots, stuff like that, may have started with good intentions, but it takes a very nasty turn.
Yeah, 100%, 100%, man. And once people get that mob mentality, like you know, once things once the shit hits the fan, um, and people get that mob mentality, like it just goes nuts. And I think like that's one of the things that's happening at the moment as well. Like no one's really allowed to have an opinion anymore. Like if someone has a different opinion to you, that means that you're against them straight away.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one's allowed to voice their opinion anymore. So yeah, I think all those things boil together, and the same stuff was happening in Australia as well, but not as charged as America. Like
Yeah.
um, it was a smaller population, and bro, as soon as people started even trying to riot in Sydney, they literally just like shut down the whole CBD and
Wow.
just arrested. They just arrested everyone. They did a blockade around the whole city so no one could drive into the city. And yeah, bro,
Wow.
like if that happened in America, man, like people, I think in America people are much more sort of up in arms about their freedom and their liberties.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, I think people are people are sort of much more laid back around that type of stuff. Like, you know, there won't be like mass rioting if they have a long lockdown, for example.
Yeah, that was actually something I was really curious to pick your brain about, just the whole experience with that in Australia. Because in America, like you said, it's the biggest issue that we especially faced during the lockdowns was its attack on our individual liberties and what our constitutional rights are. That's why you didn't see like cities getting in that scenario getting completely blockaded into where nobody can come in and out. It was very weird for the political aspect of things because there was a lot of situations where you see police or you see military, see these officials come in and break up these large gatherings. That'd be anywhere from like 25 people to 100 people. Like they even broke up funerals during that in the US. But yet, in other occasions, like depending on what people's like that city or that town's political affiliation was, it was for some reason things like that was just kind of left unnoticed. The media wouldn't cover it. There wasn't Police wouldn't come and show up. They would actually promote more people gathering. So it was a very weird time in the US during the lockdowns, and people were just constantly arguing back and forth on it.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like I remember watching it on the news every day, and it was just like nuts. It was
Yeah.
nuts, man. In Australia, we couldn't even gather in. I think it was if you gathered in a group larger than two, you got like a few $1,000 fine.
Larger than two?
Larger than two, yeah. So you could, and that was you had to have a reason for leaving. So you had to say, "Oh, look, like I'm going to the shops," for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't have a valid reason, and if you're in a group larger than two, you copped a massive like $1,000 fine or whatever. And then if you had a second warning, they could charge you with like a
Oh.
criminal offense.
And they actually arrest you and put you in jail?
Well, this is the thing with Australia, man. Like the justice system is a lot different to America. Like
Mm.
over here, you don't really go to jail for anything unless it's like pretty serious.
Okay.
Um, like they won't put you in jail, but they'll like charge you. They'll give you a big fine, and that's like they wouldn't throw you in jail really.
Okay. Now, what if you don't end up paying that fine at all?
Oh, the tax office will get to you, man. They always find their way.
They just
They
start
just
just taking straight from your check?
yeah, that's it. They do. They find
Wow.
they um they find out your bank details and they just the AT